The opinions and statements expressed in the following program do not necessarily reflect those of WWDB, its staff, or management.
Good day, everyone. Welcome again to another edition of Boomer Generation Radio. This is your host, Richard Address, coming to you live from the studios of WWDB AM 860 here in Greater Philadelphia and streaming live on WWDBAM.com. We welcome you to this in many ways, special edition, hour-long conversation today. We just have a couple of guests here throughout the entire hour, our distinguished clergy panel, and we're going to really be talking, I hope, about the impact of Passover and Easter, which, as many of you know, are appearing at the same week. Passover starting Monday night and Easter Sunday coming up this Sunday. And we want to talk a little bit about the impact of these holidays on a psychospiritual level for baby boomers, the impact of our own aging parents, various aspects that really are focusing in as people sit down around these tables to celebrate these holidays, which are the most important in many ways, holidays within both religious traditions, and really, I think, have lots to say on a variety of different levels on those of us who are of the baby boom generation and perhaps our parents' generation and maybe the generations that are coming up afterwards if they see these things a little bit differently. And we will return with and introduce to you our very, very distinguished clergy panel after a couple of housekeeping announcements. First of all, if you, again, would like to touch base with the program and give us any ideas or suggestions, you can email us at boomergenerationradio@gmail.com. That's boomergenerationradio@gmail.com. And we want to reintroduce our sports trivia question for this particular program. And if you know that answer, we invite you to call in the call-in number at 610-664-4100. And here is your super-duper Passover Easter trivia question that really is courtesy of our trivia consultant, Alan. And it really celebrates the fact that the Philadelphia Flyers are starting the playoffs against the much-hated and evil New York Rangers on Thursday night. So here's the question. It's an editorial comment. On May 4th, 2000, a long time ago, on May 4th, 2000, the Philadelphia Flyers beat the Pittsburgh Penguins in a playoff game that went 5 overtimes. Some of you may remember that. They served breakfast. Who scored the game-winning goal for the Flyers on May 4th, 2000, when the Philadelphia Flyers beat the Pittsburgh Penguins in a playoff game that went 5 overtimes? Who scored that playoff-winning goal in the 5th overtime? And the prize, of course, is a gift certificate to Short Hills Deli in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, home of some great vegetable soup, by the way. We'd like to also welcome again one of our friends to Boomer Generation Radio, the Hecht Investment Group of Janney Montgomery Scott. The Hecht Investment Group of Janney Montgomery Scott provides concierge financial consulting and planning services. Using a formal investment process as their foundation, clients receive frequent communication and rapid response to questions. And as many of us know, there are no needs greater than our own when it comes to personal financial planning. The Hecht Investment Group provides experience, guidance, and an efficient management process that is important in today's environment. Contact the Hecht Investment Group toll-free at 855-289-2168. That's 855-289-2168. Mention that you heard about it on Boomer Generation Radio. You can visit them at hechtinvestmentgroup.com. And the Hecht Investment Group is also on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And Peter Hecht of the Hecht Investment Group was recognized by the Philadelphia Magazine and New Jersey Magazine as a 5-star wealth manager for 2013 and 2014. Janney Montgomery Scott is a member of the New York Stock Exchange, FINRA, and SIPC. That's the Hecht Investment Group of Janney Montgomery Scott. So for today's edition of Boomer Generation, we'd like to welcome back two old friends to the program. Cheryl Wade, associate pastor at the Second Baptist Church in Germantown here in Philly. Eloise Scott, also reverend at the Second Baptist Church in Germantown and a pastoral pastoral psychology therapist. Okay. And a colleague of ours, Rabbi Eric Goldberg from Congregation Shirami in Bucks County. So welcome, all of you. Welcome to Boomer Generation Radio.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I feel confident I know the answer to the question you asked earlier.
Well, if nobody calls in, you can win the gift certificate to Short Hills. It's around the corner from where you live.
Convenient.
Your wife may, certainly your son will enjoy it, I hope.
Of course.
So Easter and Passover this same week, two of the most important, if not the most crucial festivals in both the Jewish and Christian calendars. And in your experience, the varieties of experiences that you have, what to families and to specifically older adults who may be looking back on a life or see these festivals as real family important and family centered, other than the religious significance, what's your experience? Why are these festivals so powerful and so important in our families and in our traditions? Scotty?
Well, I think in my tradition, but particularly my family, it came from the generations preceding my parents' generation. It was a time for family, a time for big dinner, a time for celebration of Easter, and Easter was always about Resurrection Sunday. We celebrated those few days before Easter, which included Maundy, Thursday with communion and washing of the feet, and Good Friday, which was often a long service on the 7 last words of Christ. And then, of course, Resurrection Sunday. And if we were fortunate, we'd also get Easter Monday as a holiday. So for my family, it was a celebratory time. It was not always a time for extended family, but at least the immediate family that was, my parents and my siblings. And it was always a time of specialness in that you got a new outfit because it was Resurrection Sunday and you had to be dressed and ready to go to church on that day. So it was very much oriented toward your faith, and faith in God, but faith in the Trinitarian God and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I think it has changed somewhat, though, over the years, and it saddens me, some of the change. It seems to have become more secularized. I remember the little chickens in the window of the 5 and 10 cent store, and I would say, "Ooh, Mom, aren't they nice? And it's about the chickens and the bunnies." And my mother would say, "No, it's about resurrection." And of course, we were little kids, so we were fascinated by the little chickens. But I think my mother grew up on a farm, and all she could think about was the chickens provide eggs and food. Right. But I think for me, it is still a faith-imbued holiday. All of the celebrations, we had the Maundy Thursday service, the Good Friday service, the Easter services, which oftentimes are 2 or more, because extended family, even if they didn't come any other Sunday in the year, grandmom or mom would say, "You're coming to church on Easter." So it's a special holiday still, particularly for those who are devout and very faithful to the tradition.
In the Jewish tradition, Eric, are you seeing this gradual, maybe not so gradual, secularization, or is this still? Is Passover still okay? I may not set foot in a synagogue for an entire year. This is the one day we're going to grandmother's house, or we're having the family over. This is it.
So I think statistically, it's been proven that when studies have been done, that of all the holidays, of all the rituals that Jewish people are engaged in during the year, the Passover Seder is the number one on the list, even more so than maybe people who will attend high holiday services, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur services, or other life cycle events during the year. So I think there is still this real feeling of being connected to family and wanting to be with your family. In fact, where we're sitting here just reminded me that it's not always, for example, at someone's home. Growing up, we had our Seders just down the street at the GSB building, if you remember where that is, on the very top floor. And as a little kid, it seemed like all the cars were tinier than could be. So I remember those days very well. And yesterday we were at my one of my family's members' homes over in Cherry Hill, and it just reminded me that of all the people that were there, we probably, in the days of when I was a little kid, had, I'll say, 50 people at the Seder. And of the older generation, there's only one person who still was able to be with us yesterday. And so I think one of the things that we're seeing is not just a move towards a more secular, let's just get together to celebrate Passover, and I'll put that in quotes, whatever the Seder might be or whatever the liturgy might be is a little more loose, but also the idea of kind of, as you were talking about before, the family in general getting to be smaller, or people moving away and not coming back for this type of event, whereas maybe kids who are going to college might come back for Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur to be with their family. So I think it is getting more secular, and so maybe the Seder, which was once, I guess many of us felt went forever, has been boiled down to 12 and a half seconds of whatever we need to do, and has also become smaller just in general, I think. For a lot of people.
It's interesting because in this week's Forward, the national newspaper of the Jewish community, there's a big article about the use of electronics in Seders. There's a ton of YouTube stuff that people can use on there. I've used them actually when we had kids. Do you find, Cheryl, are you finding this same movement away from faith towards a secularization and the more electronic sort of like make it fun, but make people happy, make them feel good, as opposed to the faith-oriented aspect of Easter?
I think we are still working very advisedly. We think about how to bring in what will be meaningful to children and have fun, as well as how we will, even in that process, teach them about the faith tradition that underlies that fun. For instance, at our local church, and I'm sure in so many other Christian churches, there'll be the Easter egg hunt, and there'll be all the candy and all of that, but it won't be the centerpiece, and it won't be the only thing. It will be part of this long process of preparing and then actually celebrating Easter, and that will be Saturday, so that it doesn't conflict with the spiritual and worshipful celebration that comes on Sunday.
In our community, it's very interesting because they try to combine these, and the Seder is worship, it's liturgy, but it's also, in many Seders, geared to children, and with everything from finger puppets to songs to acting out the plagues and masks. I mean, I've seen so many different variations on the theme. I guess what this is the continual evolution of a religious festival and a religious celebration, bringing it more into the 21st century culture, especially with the use of more and more emphasis on young people. And we were talking before, Scotty, and you mentioned the fact that you've seen this not so subtle change in the generations. Mm-hmm. What do you mean by that?
Well, when I was a young girl, many years ago, my extended family got together, and the families were very large then. My mother comes from a family of 8, 7 siblings, and my father had 6 siblings and their spouses and all their children. So this was a large celebration, and my grandparents were the center of that celebration. Family reunions were the same thing, whether they were in the summer or whether they were at Christmas or at Easter. The next generation comes along, which is my generation. We're like, we're not planning for all those people. No way am I cooking like that. So it started to shift even with my generation, because my generation, I feel, didn't want to do the preparation and the sacrificing to get the entire family together. And I think that's changed even more so to the next generation. I guess that would be Generation X. Generation X is, I'm not really not interested in that. And so it has shifted, in my opinion, it has shifted over the years. So I wonder how the millennials feel about the celebration. Do they show up because grandma says you should, and they have respect for grandmom, assuming grandmom's still living, or that they just say, well, I'll just stop by, but I have other things to do. So I think it has changed. It has become, as Cheryl has mentioned, more secularized. It's all about the commercialism. buying the marshmallow bunnies and the chocolate eggs and
the Peeps.
And the Peeps, and I love Peeps too. And it saddens me in some ways, but it makes me wonder what's going to happen in the future.
If I could just add one thing from a Passover perspective,
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the challenges, well, it's become a challenge for people around my age, and so I'm going to be 38 in just a little bit, so I'll say between 35 and 45,
Mm-hmm.
is when you think of the themes of Passover, this idea of slavery, of plagues, of God doing things to other people, according to the Torah, that are maybe not the way all parents want to teach their kids about God being, this nice and loving and all the other things that come along. I think it's sometimes very difficult. I mean, the ending of the story where the Israelites moved to freedom is, of course, a wonderful thing and easy for us to talk to our kids about. But I think it's on a more global scale. Many parents find it challenging or choose not to want to talk to their kids about, who might be, let's say, in elementary school age, about some things that are very difficult topics to talk about, people enslaving other people, the idea of, in the Torah, again, Moses killing an Egyptian taskmaster who he sees abusing a slave. So these are all parts of the Passover story, and again, become very challenging for a lot of parents to talk to their kids, much in the same way as it's very difficult to talk to our children about a lot of things that are going on in the world. And as many people know, there was a call yesterday when we sat down for our Seder to mention and have a moment of silence or some prayer for what went on in Kansas City with the Jewish community there. And again, as my 8-year-old son is sitting there, it's a challenge to kind of really think about, how do you say somebody walked into a Jewish community center, and it would be the same if it was a Christian center of any kind and strictly based on religion took people's lives.
One of the things, Eric, you sort of like opened the door. One of the things I wanted to talk to you guys about this morning as well is some of these changes that we're talking about and the impact upon baby boomers as we ourselves age. These festivals, the Passover Seder, the Easter celebrations from Good Friday, Maundy, Thursday through Sunday, and the traditional Easter dinner. They carry with them so many themes of transition and life passage. The impact upon our generation and our parents' generation as we confront our own mortality. What do you see in your work? How do these festivals relate, in your opinion, to this whole concept of transition and aging? Somebody?
Well, I think they touch us at this very deep level. And, of course, anything we say will be true for some people and not true for others. But I think clearly in the Christian traditions, and I've certainly stood by the beds of many people who claim that for them this experience of and hope of resurrection is really what keeps them going through those valleys that we all face, and particularly as people face the end of their lives. I think we live in a culture where you have to do anything and everything possible to stave off death, no matter what it costs personally, economically, etc. And I think the spiritual response to that is we don't have to do all that. Mm-hmm. It's going to be all right because we're not meant to be here long, and there's more to life, which is the life of faith.
Talk to me a little bit about the understanding of how we as clergy, and in the context of the liturgy and in the context of these celebration, really speak to that truth of this life of faith. Because from what you're telling me at the beginning of the show, there's a retreat from that. There's a retreat from this understanding of this, the life of faith. But yet, a lot of times, as we've all been in counseling situations with individuals, that winds up being, let's forget the material stuff because it really doesn't make much difference. And it becomes this relationship-based type of life when things get a little dicey.
Yeah, no, if I can just say, I always find it fascinating. I don't know what you guys are finding in church, but that there are many people for whom any particular, and let's just use the Seder here or Passover observance here, in the Jewish community, who it may not be important to them and they may outwardly say that. And then when it comes to either, God forbid, a family member is coming to the end of life, or they themselves are coming to the end of life, they feel that need to be with their rabbi or with their cantor talking about these type of things. Or, again, when life ends, for the rabbi or the cantor to be there to, officiate at the funeral. And so it's very fascinating for me to see, because I think for a lot of people, I don't want to say hedging their bets, but it's almost a little bit like that, right? I want to, even if I am not from the age of, let's say, adulthood, 18 to whenever life starts to, when one takes on this idea of life is coming closer to the end than, let's say, the beginning, there is a turn at that point, I think, to a little more trying to connect maybe with one's history, with one's religion, even if, for example, in connection to Judaism, there is no real adherence to the mitzvot or the commandments, things that might be of importance to Jewish history for thousands of years. But in that moment, which I think very much speaks to what you were talking about before, the electronic, let me know the information now, let me get the latest, whatever it happens to be, people live very much in the moment. And that's also, I think, when that relational situation arises for a lot of people when it comes to transitions in life.
If we take the image of, in both spiritual traditions, both the Christian tradition and the Jewish tradition, this concept of the wilderness is a very powerful religious motif. And it may very well be, I'm not a biblical scholar by any stretch of the imagination, but it very well may be one of the motifs that unite religious traditions around the world. I have a funny feeling it is. But I know for since Jesus must go into the wilderness, he has to, and the whole metaphor of the Exodus wilderness, this whole sense, I think, of individuals as we confront our own mortality, as Eric was talking about, as we sense that we are on this journey, which in many ways is a wilderness journey. We are constantly searching for a sense of meaning. We're constantly searching for a sense, especially as we get older. And when we're in a pastoral counseling situation, I just came across a bunch of reports from the healthcare chaplaincy who just ran a conference a couple of weeks ago on some of these very, very topics. And the pastoral counselors reported that when they are engaged, a lot of chaplains, when they're engaged in pastoral counseling work with an individual, then in more times than not, the major component of those conversations have nothing to do with end of life, but they want to talk to that chaplain about real life practical issues, my job, my family, just practical issues. Have you experienced that?
Absolutely. As one matures from being a very young adult through middle adulthood, you encounter situations, you encounter those wilderness experiences where you have no answers. You thought you knew a lot, and you find out you know more, much less than you knew when you were younger. And I think because there are no answers, you need something to believe in, something to have faith in. You believe with all your heart that God has the answers. And however we appropriate that, it says, I believe there is someone who knows and can help me with this. And oftentimes we encounter not one human being that has the answer. Mom, dad, friend, teacher, they don't have the answers. And so we grapple with, where is my faith now? And we suddenly realize that we are mortal and that we don't have the answers, and where do we go from here? And I think that's when your faith becomes very important to you, because God is going to help me. God is going to help me. And God is going to help me by showing me the way, by guiding my feet, by giving me a sense of this is the way to go. And I think because they see us, all the religious leaders, as people who can be journeyers with them, then they seek us and they seek the counsel from us.
I think we're talking about faith development, and so much has been written about faith development, which clearly implies that we're not going to be the same when we're 12 from a faith perspective, hopefully, as we are when we're 25 or 50 or 75. I think in that development, or I have also seen other people in that development process quit compartmentalizing what is spiritual and what is secular. It's not my real job here or my real life over here and then the spirit over here. It becomes much more integrated as we age. So I think it's quite appropriate that you hear the chaplain taking on those things that seem to be very practical because it's much more integrated by that time.
And if I could just add one other thing, because I really appreciate what you guys said about the whole faith aspect, I think there's another wilderness as well, which is the family on a certain level goes into a wilderness, right? Like I think of the fact of my uncle who used to lead the Seder, just to bring it back to something we were talking about before, when he passed away many years ago, the question was, who's going to lead the Seder, right? I mean, I wasn't a rabbi at that time. I mean, I was a younger guy, and that, there's all these types of issues, kind of the family wandering into the wilderness. This person had probably many roles within the family, whether it was their nuclear family or extended family, and the question then becomes, what are we going to do?
It reminds me of the Barry Levinson film, I think it was a 70s film, Avalon, where the grandfather cut the turkey at Thanksgiving dinner, and there's just many scenes, but it really speaks to this. What's happening with that generation who is dying out or who is no longer available to lead the Seder, to be the patriarch or the matriarch during the Easter celebration? Who's taking their place? Are we passing down these traditions, or is there a fear that I seem to pick up in your conversation that some of these traditions may be dying out within a family?
I would just say this. I think one of the challenges for, let's say, the next generation is, for example, in the Torah, Moses passes that to Joshua, the leadership role. And I think on a certain level, even though there might be some family dynamic challenges, I think for many people of the next generation, it would almost be easier if one of the matriarchs said, you're the next person to that person, rather than there being this void, this gap, because for whatever reason, I think the younger generation is less likely to say, I'm going to do this. Or one person of that generation is less likely. That's what I'm seeing.
But I'm wondering, because I've seen this happen, where the torch, if you will, is passed, and the person says, no, I don't want it.
Right.
The person says, no, not me, I'm not going to do it, and stands by it. And then that gives another level to the wilderness, because then it's like, who's going to do it?
We're really wandering.
Yeah, we're really wandering.
Of course, and the interesting part is that so often someone whom you thought never would take on that mantle does pick it up, because there is meaning and desire for continuity in that family.
We're with Reverend Eloise Scott from the Second Baptist Church, and a pastoral psychologist and therapist. Reverend Cheryl Wade, also the associate pastor in the Second Baptist Church in Germantown here in Philadelphia. Rabbi Eric Goldberg of Shirami in Bucks County on this edition of Boomer Generation Radio. Just talking a little bit about the impact of Passover and Easter this week on our two communities and what it may mean to family systems, and especially those of us in the boomers and our parents. We'll get back to this in a second, but I just want to also bring you a word from another good friend of the program here, and that's Samaritan Healthcare and Hospice. And they've asked me to remind you that if you've ever worried about your parents' failing memory, or concerned about your parents' safety at home and not sure where to turn for help, if your answer to yes to any of these concerns, then we suggest you think about Senior Wise Care. Senior Wise is here for you. Senior Wise geriatric care managers can provide a comprehensive assessment and care plan, help keep your loved ones safe at home, screen and monitor in-home services, and help you avoid costly mistakes. They can also ease your loved one's transition to a care facility if that becomes necessary. Senior Wise is a member of the Samaritan family of services, and to speak with a Senior Wise geriatric care manager today, we invite you to call 856-552-5166. That's 856-552-5166, and log on to www.seniorwisecare.org. Senior Wise Care, one word. www.seniorwisecare.org, and the phone number again, 856-552-5166. And again, Senior Wise is a member of the Samaritan family of services. Mention Boomer Generation Radio when you call. The focus of our conversation today with our guests, Eloise Scott, Cheryl Wade, and Eric Goldberg, on the impact